Okay, here we go. This was Thursday's discussion, and I'm going to call this Myers-Briggs in a nutshell. So this is what we covered. This will just kind of be a review for everybody. First of all, we looked at the student portfolio and making sure we had all of our files in Google Drive. It looks like we have that, but we'll need to go back and share the files on Google Drive and to share the website. And I'll show you how to do that in a video and then in class on Tuesday. So what we talked about was the personality code Myers-Briggs in Thursday's class. And there are three basic pieces of information or documents that you need to read. One is called the Myers-Briggs Basic. The other is the Myers-Briggs and Learning Methods. And the final one is How Preferences Affect Learning. And I basically covered the Myers-Briggs Basic, which I'm going to go over again today. And then I will send you all three of these to kind of review. On Tuesday of next week, we're going to do some Myers-Briggs activities to start the day off. We are then going to look at cultural diversity and conflict management, which tie right into Myers-Briggs, because cultural diversity not only is a difference in where we were born and how we were raised, but also in how our personalities develop. So there's diversity within just Myers-Briggs alone. Also, the conflict management, our Myers-Briggs code will tell us how we typically would handle a conflict and to see if that's the best way for us to approach conflicts. So that's kind of what we talked about in class. I'd like to kind of wrap up and wrap around this Myers-Briggs Basic because that's really important. Also, before I get into this, you will have to submit the Session 10 participation points. That is an activity on Myers-Briggs. So make sure you read that, the instructions for Session 10 participation points. And the and the personality type reflection document. And that's in Module 10, I believe. I'll have to check and make sure on that. And I'll go over that after I get through this. So let's look at this, and let's look at the Myers-Briggs Basic. Kind of looks like this. I kind of put this into a form that is easier to follow than what I had in class. So it begins with, why should you study personality types? Well, big thing here is personality types. There are all kinds of personalities. And according to Myers-Briggs, there are actually 16 of them. So people are different. And to understand each other and to get along, we need to understand ourselves first. And then we can understand others, because all of these traits seem to fall under common categories, only at a different level or different degrees. So it's really important to get along in this world, to know your personality, to know others' personalities, and then to be able to adjust so that everybody gets along. I think that's really important for our success, not only in school and in work, but in our success in general in life. And it's also very important for the world's continued existence, if you think about it. So let's start off. So Myers-Briggs, what is it and why? Myers-Briggs is a concept, developed theory, if you will, by Isabel Briggs. And she was attempting to explain Carl Jung's interpretation of personality types. And Carl was a very famous psychologist back in the 1920s. And he came up with the introvert, extrovert, intuitive, sensing, thinking, feeling part of the Myers-Briggs. Isabel came along and in the 40s started to expand on that. And she ended up adding a fourth category, which is the JP, which is judgment, judging or perceiving. And all of these put together create an assessment that helps us understand differences among people in a consistent manner. So we have 4 categories that we can look at and compare and see how those match together or don't match together, and then to try to understand how to help them modify so that everybody can at least find some common ground. This method has been proven reliable and valid. Interesting point, Isabella Briggs was not a psychologist. She did not have a medical background, but she had a deep interest in people being successful. And that's why she started digging into this. She wanted to make a methodical way of understanding people and helping other people understand people. So, and this all came about over the last 50, 60 years. Myers-Briggs is used by many, many corporations, many schools. Was used by the military. It probably still is. I don't know that for sure. But it helps people understand people. So there are 4 areas that it looks at. First one is called introvert extrovert, the IE right here. And they call this the favorite world. Do you focus on the outer world, the exterior world around you, or is your focus more on your inner world? Are you more interested in ideas and concepts and how you feel in many ways, rather than the exterior world and what's going on around you? And we're going to get more into this in a little bit. Or you can have, and that's your first one. So how do you see your world, or how do you experience your world, I guess? The next one is, how do you take in information? And that's an S and N, sensing or intuitive. So how do you take in information? Why is that important? This is probably one of the most important parts for education, because education is all in taking in information and internalizing it for use in other areas. So this one, there's either the S, which is the detailed view, or the N for intuitive, for the big picture view. And we talk about a little bit more about that on further down in our discussion. The third way is, how do we make decisions? And that's a thinking or feeling. And basically, that's, do you have to make your decisions logically with your head or emotionally with your heart? You could see how those two might disagree a bit, right? The final one that Isabel added was structure, or how do you live your life, your lifestyle? Is it a structured lifestyle, such as a judge, where you've got everything in nice, neat, tidy little rules, and this is how things work? Or is it flowing, where you just kind of go with whatever happens and adjust as you go along? 2 very different ways of being in the world. So after you take the test, the Myers-Briggs test, there are 16 different types, and it comes out to be a 4-letter code. As you can see here, I lost my cursor. And you should fall into one of these categories. Now, you may be in the middle. You may be able to say you may be intuitive, and you may be thinking. I mean, you could do some things intuitively, some things by thinking. It's very similar to being right-handed or left-handed. Just because you're right-handed doesn't mean you don't use your left hand. You just prefer to use your right hand. So kind of, we're not trying to put you into a box or anything, but we're trying to understand why you react the way you react. And then you can understand how other people react. So you should have come up with one of these. So what is your type? And then we need to verify. I mean, sometimes people say, well, yeah, I guess, but I don't really feel that way. So then what we do is we come down here and go through these personality styles, these characteristics. Here's the E and the I. Go through these, read them, select, and you're going to have stuff on both sides. Select the ones that are like you, and then add them up and see if you have more on the introverted side rather than the introverted side versus the extroverted side. Does that match with what your test says? Really key important. again, you've got the same thing for the kind of information, S or N. This should be N. I don't know why it's an I. Even I'm confused. So, do you rather have details, or would you rather have a big picture and possibilities? Kind of do the same thing. Which one do you have the most of on those? Then how do you decide? Same thing. And then the kind of environment. What are you most comfortable in? So when you get all done with this, compare which one of these you have the most of and compare it to what the test shows. Does it agree? That's the important thing. And why doesn't it agree? And how does that help you? So that kind of lays this out. Now there is more information for those S's. That was kind of the big picture, okay? For those of you who are S's or sensing, here is the supporting data with all of the details that will help you understand Myers-Briggs a little bit better. And I also hope that you read on the website what your characteristics are, because that's going to help you answer this last question for the activity is, oh, it's going to be nasty here. So let me stop and go find that. I'll be right back. Okay, I finally found it. And I spared you the anguish of watching me search through my files. So this is the big activity or the big assignment for the Myers-Briggs. You're going to create 4 paragraphs. The first paragraph is going to have what your 4-letter code is. You're going to describe each letter and give examples of how it describes you. And this is where you can say you agree or you disagree and then give examples of that. In paragraph 2, you're going to discuss how you think this code does or does not fit your perception of yourself. How has this been enlightening as to how you see yourself? Was there any ahas when you went through this? Or did you think that you were a very quiet person and found out that maybe you were a little bit extroverted? These are the places where you're doing a comparison to what you thought you were versus how this test is seeing you. Paragraph 3 talks about how does this make you think of others in your life in terms of their personality type. Give 3 examples of how this could impact your interactions with them. And what I have mentioned in class is look at somebody from work, or look at somebody from home, maybe somebody from work, and somebody from school. Kind of figure out what you think their Myers-Briggs code might be just by how you've worked with them, and explain how your code versus their code intertwines and why you may have difficulties. I think I mentioned, do you have a sister that really irritates you? Why is that? Is it because her personality is totally different than yours and that you're not understanding where she's coming from and she's not understanding where you're coming from? So that's what you want to kind of do in paragraph 3. Paragraph 4 is, how can knowing your personality type help you be successful in college and in your career? And I would add to that, in your personal life. Because those are 3 areas that are actually encompass your entire life in most cases. How does your personality, how does knowing your personality, how is that going to help you be more successful? When you write this up, make sure you use 12-point font. It's double-spaced and it has indented paragraphs. I'm not going to rip you apart for grammar, but try to make it as solid as you possibly can. Do not print a copy of this paper and hand it in. I don't want a copy of that paper. I should have taken that out. And then you can upload this to your portfolio because it needs to be in your portfolio. So that pretty well wraps up what we did in class. I hope this has helped a little bit, put it in perspective. Please read the other 2 documents that I'm going to send along in an email. And I hope you've enjoyed this. I have. Have a good weekend.